Welcome back to the Superwomen channel and our series of Superwomen sessions over Zoom with brilliant ladies in TV, film and broadcasting, hopefully giving you some insight into their work lives and so we can garner their words of wisdom on what we can be doing during this global pandemic, COVID-19, but also to feel inspired for when we come out the other side. So today we welcome documentary filmmaker Li-Da Kruger. She will tell us about some of the incredible projects that she's worked on. But hi, Li-Da, how are you doing? And how has lockdown been for you?
Hi there. Hi. Doing really well, actually. Lockdown so far has been not many changes because my husband and I both work from home anyway. We're freelancers, and so and we have a young son, so we take turns looking after him, and luckily we have a big flat so he can run around in. So lockdown so far has been actually quite productive and good family time, I think, actually, which because we just recently adopted as well. So yeah, it's been a very good bonding time. Yeah,
which you might not have had.
No, exactly. I mean we did, but I mean it's really made us gel, which is good.
Yeah.
And are you able to carry on working at the moment?
Yes. So we, my husband and I I work in the morning, and he works in the afternoon, and we look after our son. I look after him in the afternoon. So it just, luckily, we're both at stages of our work that we could do that. I mean, it's different when we're on location or something, and then, but no one's on location at the moment. So we've been lucky.
So when did you know that you first wanted to be a filmmaker?
Well, it sounds a bit weird this, but at aged 14, I literally had a lightning moment. I sat bolt upright in my bed and I wanted to make a film about my roots because I'm adopted from Cambodia, and I was adopted I was rescued basically just before the genocide. So up until, and I ended up with the white family in England. You can probably tell my accent. I don't know whether your viewers are foreign. So it's always been a massive thing in my life, but I didn't understand what I didn't understand what my Cambodian side was. So at age 14, I realized I want to make a film about this because no one I know knows about Cambodia. I want to tell everyone about Cambodia. And then, I grew up and I asked advice from a filmmaker friend of mine. I want to make a film. Do I go into TV or do I go into feature film? And he said, he's a film director. He said, go into TV. It's a much faster turnaround. And I then went into the industry, and I was lucky. Pretty much a year after I started, I ended up in an amazing production company called Fulcrum, who then made the film a year later with me about my past and searching for my Cambodian parents. But yeah, I always knew I was going to end up in film because it was a way to, tell stories you want to tell, and it's mass media. Stories with messages, if that's what you want to do.
That's amazing. So at 14, you had this epiphany that you wanted to make this film. And then when was that realized? How old were you when you actually came to make this film?
I was 27, so it quite a long time after. But I think, I always wanted to do the search, and I was aware that, I think the search was such a big concept that I didn't want to just start looking and, sort of have a look quick under the surface. I had to put the time aside to do it properly. And also I would have had to have the means to do it and, have a certain, I had to be adult basically, and with money. And then because I went into the industry and I was lucky, I found a production company that wanted to do it quite soon. So, and then you have a production company supporting you. But actually, I mean, we can talk about that later, but it ended up not being commissioned the usual way. It was one of the first feature docs that production company did, actually, independently.
And was that just because they loved the idea? Because obviously it's a strong idea. It's your personal story as well.
Yeah, I think, I mean, gosh, it was a long time ago. It was almost 20 years ago now, but, and I was very green. And I think, yes, I mean, it was a strong story for them, but it wasn't commissioned, I think, because there were too many unknowns. I was unknown. The director was known, but, that wasn't enough for them. They didn't know what we were going to find, if anything. So I think it was just quite a hard story to, put a lot of money behind. I think it was £190,000 back then, or something like that. It was. I don't think the Touching the Void hadn't been made at that point, so it was a new area for everyone. And Fulcrum, this is the company, and Christo Hurd, who most people know as Dartmouth Films today. That he, it was the first time he looked into tax schemes and, contact. My mother's quite well known, and she and connected. So we just literally used her contacts book to try and raise the money, and we managed to raise a lot of money, actually, and all our contacts obviously combined. But it was. I mean, it's not that they didn't know what they were doing, but it was very new territory at that 20 years ago. And luckily, we had a great director and a great team, and we got and just luck in terms of documentary making. we got great content as well. We found things out, and we had the ups and downs that you need for a good story. Blah blah blah.
So, what was your path into telly then? Prior to that, what was your path into the telly bit, and how did you work your way up in that?
Well, I graduated. I did a very strange degree in terms of what I ended up doing, French and marketing, just by chance, really, in Scotland. But then I did a little stint at New York Film Academy to get. My parents said, "You wanted to do film, why don't you go and do film?" So I did that, and it was amazing. And then I was just really lucky. I did a year of TV in South Africa. I love traveling, and I was in South Africa because my adoptive parents are both South African, and I didn't want to go back to England because it was winter back in England. So I decided I'd just stay in South Africa, and for a year I did amazing productions, so I did a lot of running and producing. Did everything. I had a sort of experienced loads of different things there, and then came back to England in 2000, and did 3 months doing as work experience. World Records, that was it. And so I was literally, this is sort of not my finest moments, but I remember walking down the King's Road with a producer trying to find lawyers that burped or farted the loudest. I mean, it was just the most, I mean, it was great fun, but I did think, what am I doing? Anyway, and then I found this production company, Fulcrum, who I then stayed with for 5 years and learned a lot of, it was very good training, that company, because they came from a journalist background, the two heads of the company, and mainly specialist factual stuff. So everything I was interested in. So yeah, that's how I got into telly, really.
And how did you convince the guys at Fulcrum that, this idea that you'd had since you were 14, that it was something worth making?
Luckily for me, it was quite an epic story anyway, in terms of, it was Cambodia, it was the genocide, or I escaped the genocide. It was a big, search. I didn't, the story, luckily the elements of the story sort of spoke for themselves. I have to thank a lady called, still a friend now, Claire Hanford, who basically kept saying to the Christo, this is an amazing story, you've got to do it. Even when it looked as if it was not going to happen, she really made it happen. So it was her that really did make it happen. And she just persevered. even though she didn't produce it in the end, which was a real pity, but just one of those things.
It does feel like so much of filmmaking is that, isn't it? It's like just perseverance, and you are going to get like a lot of rejection and a lot of no's, but you've just got to kind of push through it. Has that been your experience of filmmaking as well? Have you kind of had to face setbacks and rejections, and if so, how do you overcome them?
It is, yes, you're quite right. There are a lot of rejections, and you have to get really good at pitching, which I'm still not very good at. But no, it's, you just have to, my advice is that, pick a subject you are really passionate about, and you can't really tire of trying to sell it, because, and also I find after a certain amount of time that you've spent on something, you feel you can't go back. So I don't know if that's a good thing or not, but I just think, yes, definitely choose something that you're really passionate about. And, it's the industry, you will get no's, you will get knockbacks, but there is money out there. There are grants out there. You've got to work out it is difficult because there's so much competition for these grants, but it's good to get, I find, to team up with either friends that are doing the same thing, so you can encourage each other and help each other and do the research, saying, there's a grant here that might be useful for you, kind of thing. So, and also, or get a producer or, someone to actually work with you on the film, because then you feel you're not alone. And I think that's the one thing that is quite difficult when you're an independent, sorry, I can't speak. When you're an independent filmmaker, that is quite hard, being on your own sometimes, because you need such a lot of motivation to keep on going when it does look as if you keep getting no's from grants. But don't give up, because you will get there. You will definitely get there.
How do you tend to find projects? Yeah.
Well, I find my own projects by interest. So, and I've found myself, and I don't think it's a coincidence, but I am kind of obsessed with cultural identity in Cambodia. And, if I look at the three films, the real films that I've been part of, the first one was 20 years ago, the first trip to Cambodia, about finding my roots. I've been making a film about how the power of dance helps genocide survivors heal from the atrocities and the traumas they've experienced through traditional dance, basically. And that was following a dance troupe to America, and that was an incredible experience, because I think I was, although I was filming a dance troupe and the effect on refugee communities in America, I was also the audience, if you see what I mean. And I was trying to explore cultural identity there. But and then the one I've just made for Channel 4, with my mother this time, going back, I mean, it's a kind of updated version of my trip back to Cambodia 20 years ago, but this time it was more about, I think it was more about adoption and the mother's journey, the adoptive mother's journey in trying to understand my identity. So far, and I'm writing a book also about about that. So for me, it's just, cultural identity, belonging. Also this idea of, destiny, without sounding too mumbo jumbo about it. If any element in my story was the tiniest bit different, I would be someone else's daughter, or I'd be somewhere else in the world. So I'm writing a book which is sort of around the same thing, but also trying to track down other children that were adopted, whose adoptions were arranged by the same woman that saved me, to sort of see where they ended up in the world, because I feel our lives are kind of interchangeable. And also it's the wider story is all these children that were born in the East and ended up in the West, kind of thing.
I guess it's a bit of a spoiler for people that haven't seen it, but did you find your birth parents?
No. But what was extraordinary about this last trip is that I really didn't, I've always thought my birth parents were dead, so I've never you know, it's all about expectations. I've never thought they would be alive, but I had never found in 20 years any trace of Cambodian family. And with the advances in technology, basically through DNA, and it wasn't even done in Cambodia, it was done before I, I left, ancestry.com. And just by total chance, I had my third cousin in Long Beach, California, had also done a test, and we were matched. So it's like, and then we found her family, her distant family in Cambodia. So that is a spoiler, I'm afraid, but I mean, it won't spoil the story. But so for the first time ever, even though they're third cousins, which is so ridiculously distant, you could still put it on a family. Well, no, you couldn't even put it on a family tree. We did try and do one, but it was missing a layer. And and Cambodians have so many children that, you know, it could be any line of the family. So, but you know, at least we were able to go to a village where I might have grown up in, kind of thing.
It sounds like you've had a lot of projects that have been, you know, kind of started as a passion project, and then you've somehow got them off the ground, and you've worked in these two worlds of, like, you know, TV where things are maybe commissioned and then you're hired, and also, you know, initiating an idea and getting that funded. And could you just talk to us about those two different paths, and like how you find working in each?
Yeah, I mean, I loved my time in TV. I think I was a good 15 years, and I only left because I became ill. So TV, I mean, it's very buzzy. You're so busy, you know, your family life, forget family life, I found, you know, especially at the beginning when you want to, you know, you want the job, so you'll do anything to get it. And you want to and I love the travel part, and I'd always say, you know, please let me stay for another month. You know, I've got nothing at home. And that's the other thing. I mean, as you know, as soon as you start having family, then obviously that changes. So, but also what I loved about it is that you had a mini PhD for however long you were on that project, you know, 3 months or 6 months. And, you know, I used to do a lot of ancient history, which I hadn't done at school particularly, or definitely not at university. So I just found it really, really fascinating, all the research that was involved, and, you know, meeting all these experts and traveling around the world. And you can choose, as you know, the kind of programs you make. You know, I mean, and I think, yeah, so I chose specialist factual. But then, so there's a degree of what you can choose, I suppose. Obviously, you've got to be hired. You've got to, you know, your employers have got to make sure that you're the right person for their project. But it does give you a chance to work on a whole range of amazing projects, I think, and learn, you know, because you're in big teams often. Whereas I think the independent side of it, I mentioned earlier, I mean, I love it because you can really get behind a project that you're passionate about. It's yours. You have creative control over it. You don't have to compromise, really. I mean, yes, of course you have to compromise. You have to work out, you know, do other people want to watch it? You know, and you have to, you know, when you're filling in forms for grant money, you have to pitch it in a way that, you know, will work for people to give you that money. But I think it's a very different process. It's a much longer process. I've been making this film about the Cambodian dancers for since 2013. So it is, but then a lot of other stuff has gone on in that time as well. So, you know, it's, but I will finish it. You know, it's one of those projects that I love doing. I filmed it all. I just need money for post-production, and I know that money's there. And actually I was going to move to LA with my family in July. And because there's a much bigger Cambodian American audience there, and actually, to be honest, I think, more grants for filmmakers out there. That you know, lots of little ones, whereas here I think there are a few really big ones, so the competition's much higher in some ways. And I could have got I can get an American producer out there to enable me to get those grants. But it's just I think it's a slower process. You've got to really be in love with your idea, but it's a wonderful process because you really own it, I think. But I loved both. I mean, and I do love both, but it does, I think also being an independent filmmaker with my life at the moment, it works, it fits, so I would recommend both. But it's not easy not having, the feast or famine thing with independent filmmaking. That's the only other thing. But I'm lucky that we can do that, and my husband works, so we balance each other. If that makes sense.
You mentioned the competition thing. Which one would you say is a bit more difficult? Do you think independent filmmaking is the tougher too?
Well, I think it's just the grants. I mean, I don't know. The last grant I applied for was quite a long time ago now. It's probably about 3-4 years ago. Can't even remember. Probably longer. There are so many amazing ideas out there. Basically, I mean, if you go to Sheffield Documentary Festival alone, every single person you meet is a filmmaker wanting to make a film, and and there are great ideas out there, and they're quite global as well. Some of these grants, and they've only got enough for 10 projects, and you just think, and then it becomes, I think, a case of working out what, it takes a lot of homework and research. I think it's like, what does this particular grant want? How am I going to get the edge? And I don't know that answer, but there are grants out there. You've just got to do quite a lot of homework in finding them and be really organized in writing a calendar about when the grants, become open, the open call and all that, and when the deadline is. I mean, it's a whole, it's sort of the business side of things where you want to just be creative. So it's quite a hard balance, that one. Whereas the competition is obviously really high in the industry, in TV. But I just feel there's so many jobs out there. I never really had too much of a problem in finding more work. And it is because everyone's in teams, it is word of mouth, and you hear from someone that they're looking for someone, and it is who you know. Whereas grant finding doesn't really work like that. It's the written word, and sometimes, well, it's a very long written submission, and a bit of not showreel, 20 minutes of your film, depending on what stage you are at. But as I say, it's a very different process. I think, if I'm honest, I think if you have money, if you're self-sufficient financially, if you want to go for the independent filmmaking, if you've got a film and you go for it, if you can financially survive without, having to work and get a weekly wage or whatever it is.
I guess for a lot of people, though, that probably isn't possible. And then it becomes about, like Georgie and I certainly have this of like, with this project, trying to squeeze it in between like actual working contracts and trying to find the time. I mean, what if you've got an idea, what should you do with it? Like, what's the first thing to do? Is it to try and shoot something, or is it just to write it up and find a producer? Or
is this for independent?
Yeah.
I would definitely shoot something. Like you don't even have to have a complicated camera, a snazzy camera. We've all got phones, and people are interested in, because it's a film idea, people need to see something, don't they? So definitely film something, however rough it is, just to have a go. Also, I think write up, if you can write it up in a page, that's really good, because it can condense. I mean, if you can say it in 30 seconds to someone, say it to a friend what your film is about, that would be excellent, because then it really helps you kind of focus and crystallize what your idea is, because it needs to be as simple as possible. So yeah, 30-second pitch, basically elevator pitch, if you can say, and then like a one page of what it's about, why now, who your main characters are, and how long it's going to be, or something stylistically what it's going to look like. But I mean, just something to give someone an idea of what it looks like. And you can ask, I'm sure friends in the industry will help you, give you an idea of what else you might add, or but at least you have something to start with, basically.
What's the next step? Who do you do you have a hit list of people that you need to then? You've got the idea, you've got it condensed, you've maybe shot a sizzle reel or something. What do you then do to get it financed and to get the ball rolling on it with a company that can help you make it?
Well, this is where the research comes into. I mean, my advice is, if it's see what kind of film your film is. So if it's like an arts film, for example, look at the arts films you like, and then see who made them. So basically, if you like a film, see who made it, really, and approach those people, because they love, people like flattery. Not flattery, what's the word I'm looking for? They like to know that you've done a bit of homework and genuinely like your film. That always helps. And just bother people. I mean, you might not. So find the list of people that you want to approach, and then just email them, phone them. I know these days people like just to be emailed, but I just think, no, just phone them. And then they would have spoken to you if you can get through past the receptionist, and then that you can send the email. But I mean, don't be put off by people saying, not getting back to you, because I mean, we all know everyone's really busy and we all get hundreds of emails, but if you're persistent, they will remember you and they will read your email one day. So don't give up. So yeah, look at the films you like and approach the producers of that company. What else? Get advice from people you trust and admire in the industry that are friends, or that always helps. I think also watch lots of films, for ideas and ways how to just to see how you might sort of develop your own style, I suppose. And I think I would just shoot stuff if you can, in the meantime, while you're waiting for answers, because then you don't feel you're sort of sitting around and waiting. You feel more in control if you're actually actively working towards your film.
And would you recommend, like, is there a specific of the two paths, the TV and the sort of independent, someone starting out, like, what would you recommend they do?
For both of them?
Well, for just someone who's like, right, I know I want to be a filmmaker, but I don't really know where to start. Like, what kind of like, is there a path that's maybe a bit easier, or
I think I ended up doing independent film because I really wanted to start making my own stuff. So I would actually recommend that that anyone starting out should, I think starting off as a runner is a really good thing. It's there for a reason. You get to understand everything about filmmaking because you have access, because you're running, you're at the bottom of the ladder, you have access to all the departments and all the parts of the process, and you learn without the responsibility. That's what I loved about running. And then I think as your confidence builds and your interest in terms of which department you want to end up in, whether it's post-production or producing or directing or whatever it is, then you can you know, mentors, I think, is that, you know, even if it's not a spoken thing, but the people that you admire, you learn from them. And then from there, I mean, I do think it is a confidence thing, you know, try and get as much training within as on the job, I suppose. And then when you're confident that you think you can branch out and do your own thing, even if it's just on the side while you're still in the industry, because I think being alone, I have found anyway, you get so caught up in your idea, and you know, time stands still because you're working from home on your own, not in a sort of buzzy office, which is what I really miss. You know, it's quite hard to get perspective sometimes. So, you know, I think it's, I'm not saying at all don't just go out without any experience, because I think that in itself is quite, you know, wonderful and experimental. You know, you could get some really good stuff because you're not kind of jaded. You know what I mean? It's just like anything is possible. You know, so, but I can only talk from my experience. I mean, I think that, you know, my 15 years in TV were really, really useful, and sort of was able to learn the craft as such, and work out which areas I'm good at and which areas I'm not so good at, and, you know, and therefore what team members I would need if I branched out into independent film, kind of thing.
And so much of the business is about nurturing relationships and building a network of people that you can then work with. It's funny how things come full circle. Someone who maybe might have been a runner on something you worked with a long time ago, and then suddenly a few years later they might be the producer or the director. You just never know how things kind of play out. What advice would you have for building that network and building those relationships? And is there a bit of advice that anyone gave you early on that sort of stuck with you?
Yeah, I mean, I think I think staying in touch with people you admire, or become, well, friendships, I think, to start with. And you know, I don't know about you too, but you're working constantly. I hardly ever had any, you know, downtime. And when I did have downtime, I was socializing with my team. And so, and you know, that's the wonderful thing about TV. It's so intense for those 3 months or 6 months, and then you move on to the next one. So you do, in that sense, meet a lot of people. You socialize with them. You hang on to the ones that you know, obviously naturally hang on to the ones that you'll become friends with most. And they will know people. So it is about networking, and it is. So it's friendships and socializing, but it is also forcing yourself to, if you go to Sheffield Documentary Festival, for example, to go to all the people that you should go and talk to, because that's what they're there for. And I know it, you know, it's excruciating sometimes, but just, you know, it's fine, because that's what they're there for, and they want to hear from you. And yeah, go to festivals, I think, if you can, because that's a good way to see what's out there. You meet professionals. There's some great tips from the industry and independent filmmaking as well. Like I would just remember being really amazed when I heard that at Sheffield, Nick Broomfield had been working on a film, and he's Nick Broomfield for 10 years, you know, because he.
That's the Whitney one. No, not the Whitney. He did one of the Whitney ones, didn't he?
Remember.
One of the Whitney Houston.
Yeah. But anyway, so, you know, even like hardcore, well-established filmmakers, that it's still quite hard to get a film off the ground, but it doesn't mean you can't, you know. But yeah, so you can, and they're all milling around, all these guys and women at the festivals. So it's a way to sort of meet people, and it's also informal, isn't it? That you can walk up to them in a bar and say, "Hey, I've got this amazing. This is where your 30-second elevator pitch has got to be honed down to a T."
Work that room.
Exactly.
God, yeah, I find that so difficult and awkward, being at networking events, and yeah, just definitely not something that's natural to me. Did you find that, like, did you have to kind of school yourself and train yourself? And I guess as well, if you're really passionate about the subject, then that just comes through.
Yes, I mean, even now I sometimes have to just force myself around a room, because that's the other thing, working on your own, for example. You know, you love your idea, but until you're used to sort of saying it out loud, you know, sometimes think, will anyone else like my idea? I mean, that's the other thing as well. So get as much practice with saying it out loud and hearing yourself say it out loud to sort of friends or family. And also make sure that's the other thing, make sure you have business cards at the ready, because often when you meet these people at festivals, luckily, you don't actually have time to give them a 30-second pitch. You say to them, when can you meet me? When, you know, can I meet you? Hand your card over, and then you can meet them in a sort of more, not formal, but arranged situation. And then they're all ears, because that's what they're there for. So yeah, it is difficult, but you can get, you know, this is your moment to talk to Nick Broomfield. It's like, or whoever it is.
You've got to grab it and take it.
Yeah.
I was going to ask you what the most rewarding thing that you've worked on has been, but I'm guessing it's probably been one of the programs about going back to your roots in Cambodia. Maybe that film, or...
Yeah, I mean, yes, they are, simply because this is part of my self-exploration into my Cambodian roots. And although it is about finding family, and recently it's been about filling in the gaps of my family history for my son, in that sense. It's like the importance of information for everyone in terms of who we are and why we're here. And, you know, if I'm not, it's not about being whole, but sort of closure, I suppose. You know, I felt that I needed to do this to have some kind of closure, to then be able to pass it down to him. And I'm proud of them, because they have both been my ideas, and, you know, I've managed to get them over the finishing line with a lot of help. But, you know, I've made them done. And my mum was amazing to be part of this last one, because, I didn't say it earlier, the slight compromise between making independent film about that search, I would have directed it, and it would have been finding, you know, more the children that this French woman who saved me, where they ended up, and, you know, that kind of film. But I didn't want to make another film about my story, basically, but Channel 4 wanted that story, and they wanted my mother, who is a well-known face on TV. So that was the compromise. But at the same time, it was a really good thing, because it ended up being a film, as I said earlier, about sort of my mother's journey. And it is, because it was on Channel 4, it got great publicity in that sense. But in terms of, I suppose, my TV projects, I don't think there's any that particularly that stand out in terms of most proud of. I think I pretty much enjoyed all of them. Some of them, I mean, as you know, there are nightmare projects. Each project, there's some nightmare somewhere in there. But the overall experience, I think, except for one, which I won't mention, was amazing. It was just, you know, you learned so much, amazing teams, yeah, just bring it on.
Do you get kind of post-shoot and post-project amnesia, which is I always get, where I completely forget all the bad things, and then I just say, oh, that was amazing, I had a great time, and then I go and relive it again and again and again.
Yeah, totally. And also all that information as well. It's not only the sort of good, you know, the bad bits you forget, but I also forget all the information. Because you've moved on to the next one, and my brain clearly just doesn't have enough room.
We've talked to quite a few of the women that we've been speaking to on these Zoom chats, and some of them are mothers. How do you think that, obviously this, you know, working in TV, film or broadcast, it's quite a fast-paced, occasionally very long hours, sometimes can be quite an inflexible career to juggle with motherhood and having a family and being rooted in one place and all of that. How do you think it's going to affect juggling and balancing your career with motherhood?
Well, because our son we've had him for a year because he's adopted, and I only started working on the last film. Really, I mean, I was working on it, but I could work from home. It was fine. But the shoot was in January, and we were separated then. And that was the first experience of, being the mother and not being able to be the mother because I was away and shooting. So that was quite strange. But I think I'm really lucky. I have a partner that at the moment, if he's not working, he'll look after our son and vice versa. And I know that he's got a big project coming up in a year's time, and it'll swing my way. So it's kind of balancing it if you can, and we'll just see. Luckily so far we've managed to balance it in a way that works for us. But who know? I don't know what happens, but especially when he's older, then when school's involved and we can't all be in the same country. I don't know, but I'm not worried yet. Maybe I'm just I'm not thinking about that yet. But it must be hard. It must be hard. But this is where nursery, I guess, and I've got a lot of friends in the industry, female friends in the industry with children or single mums, some of them, and they make it work. I mean, they are super women, which is the title of your podcast. I didn't mean that, but they are. I like, with full respect, we make it work.
Yeah.
And how was it? The last film you made was you going back to Cambodia with your mum. How was that? How was it working and making a film with your mum?
It was really lovely, because my mum is so busy that it is almost impossible to see her. And also she lives in the other side of Oxford. I live in London, and she has a new husband, and I guess since she got married, I got married and she got married kind of at the same time. We met our guys at the same time, and you lose that. We lost, not lost touch, but there's you hardly ever get your mum on your own anymore. So I first of all wanted her to really connect with my Cambodian identity. And also I would just knew that it would just be a very special time because we are close, we do get on, but just don't have that time to be together much. So I knew whatever happened, it would be a really special experience. And on day one, I mean, we did go to a genocide museum on day one, but I don't know, it was just the way the timetable was. But I know for her wanting, for her, she doesn't cry. She's very sort of practical and straightforward. And she said, she didn't quite say I'm not going to cry, but I knew she'd been affected at some point, but I didn't quite realize it would be on day one, she'd be blubbing. And then suddenly I thought, God, I feel quite protective now. Have I opened sort of a Pandora's box for her that she didn't want to go down? But no, I mean, it was amazing because we were, I don't think I've spent 2 weeks with my mum for about 10-15 years or something. Let alone, well, actually, I don't think I've spent more than a weekend with my mum on my own recently. So, it was amazing actually. And she's quite difficult to sort of pin down even when you're with her because there's so much going on. There's emails or stuff she's got to write or something, and it just sitting her down without a computer, without her phone, it's just like, right, this is what we're doing. But I have to admit, I was really nervous about putting our relationship on public show. I was really nervous about that to begin with because I suddenly we were going, and the film I'd been trying to get off the ground for 2 years we were finally making it, and then it was like, oh, I wonder what, I suddenly got that moment of, oh my God, how's this going to be? But it was fine. And she's such a pro. She's great to work with, my mother. So, yeah, it was really good.
Amazing. And have you got anything in the works at the moment? What are you working on? What projects might be on the horizon?
Well, I'm writing a book. The book is kind of the original idea I pitched to Channel 4, which is this French woman and finding other children that she found adoptive families for. But I'm also, which is what I'm very excited about, is that Yvette, this woman, this French woman, is getting quite a lot of interest, or getting some interest, because the reason I'm so fixated on her is that I feel that without her saving me, well, she effectively saved me from genocide. And it's really weird saying this out loud even now, but I can't look at my life without seeing it through that lens. And I'm really trying to get beyond that. Maybe I never can, but for me, this book, this film, is trying to pay tribute to her in some way for saving me. And she's now dead. So, I feel once I've done the book, then I can leave that behind and move on to other film subjects.
What happened for her to come across the children and be able to save you? Are you able to tell
Yes, no, she was a French expat living in Cambodia, a businesswoman, and she ran an aeroplane company the air services between Thailand and Cambodia, but also within Cambodia. And because the Khmer Rouge at the time were besieging all the cities, her planes were the only transport between cities. So she ended up, sending medical supplies and food supplies to all these villages that were stuck, and bringing children out for medical attention to the capital. And I just, by what was going on around her, reacting to what was going around her, she turned into this humanitarian, really, because to her there seemed to be no choice. I mean, if you're faced with a sick child, you want to help them, or a lost child, and so she opened her house up to orphans and refugees, basically, or displaced children, lost children, and managed to reunite a lot of them with their families. And I happened to be one of the children she came across. I don't know how, and this I will probably never know how, but it's a really complicated story, but basically there was an American who had been working in Cambodia, but had been evacuated because of the war, but wanted to adopt a Cambodian baby, had found Yvette, this French woman, through diplomatic circles, and arranged for her to find his baby, and I was that baby. Yeah. So, and then disaster happened to them in England. My mother-to-be died, and then I went to a foster friends of theirs, and I was fostered in France, and then my mum now found me. So I was really lucky.
Wow.
What a story.
Yeah.
That's amazing. And just finally, I wanted to ask you, because you started out in TV, much like the position I'm in, and it is before all this happened, it was pretty regular work, as you said, like lots of projects out there, and you can. It's still kind of challenging finding jobs, and there's still a bit of uncertainty, but it comes with a certain level of security that independent films don't necessarily have, and making that leap into independent films could seem quite scary to someone like me, who's bread and butter TV. What would you say to anyone wanting to do that? What advice would you give, and how would they do that? Just asking for
it could be scary, but then maybe not launch into it, not carry on working in TV and start with the idea first, start with that one pager, or even the 30-second elevator pitch, so you've got an idea to work on, and then once you've got that idea to work on, you can then build up slowly, and often you might have a friend that's a producer, or you have friends that could help you with certain parts of the project. Obviously it depends on their free time as well, but you could definitely run it parallel to your job in TV. It just takes a bit longer. But having said that, I'm still working on a film after 7 years. So, it doesn't mean that you have to lose your security to make that film. It might mean that once everything's set up, you have to then put aside, a month here or a month, or even just a week here and a week there to film this, edit here, or wait for the next grant to come along or whatever. But I mean, absolutely, you can do it at the same time. And maybe that is actually, in hindsight, the better way to do it. I mean, I was ill, so I didn't really have a choice, but I could have, well, actually I did go back. I did do a few more TV jobs, but it was just worked out for me that, for personal reasons, it worked out that I didn't go full time back into TV. So, yeah, but it meant that I could fully focus on, well, no, I just did a TV thing. So what am I talking about? Yeah. I mean, you can do them both at the same time, basically.
Yeah. And obviously we're kind of potentially coming out of a lockdown state fairly soon, but I think things are gonna, we're gonna feel the repercussions of this for quite a while with social distancing, and maybe things not pinging back to exactly how it was. What can people be doing during this time to develop things, develop ideas, shooting?
Yeah, I mean, there's loads of things. I mean, I talk about forgetting the bad times. I mean, I remember a year of my TV life that I couldn't find work at all, and in that time, I decided that I would try and learn how to make myself, you felt so insecure about it. I would go to dinner parties or whatever, or go meet people outside my home, and they say, "What are you doing?" And for some reason I'd say I'm unemployed, which just, and then they don't know what to say. So I realized, okay, I've got to come up with something better than that. So I then thought, well, okay, so if I learn how to edit or write or shoot, and now because we've got phones, and there is really sort of simple free software to edit and stuff. My advice is just get creative, just have a go, even if it's just, doesn't have to be a 90-minute film. It can be a short film of a minute. That was the great thing that I learned at film school. It's a story is, beginning, middle and end. It doesn't matter how long it is. And it just means that you feel you are creative, even if no one sees it. You get that experience of creativity. You can also learn from your mistakes. And also, I think it's really good in terms of, if you shoot something and then you edit it, then if there are great big holes in your edit, you know what to shoot next time. So it's all connected. And I think my one regret is that I wished I'd learned how to write better from the beginning, actually. So I think writing is a really important part of the whole process. I mean, you wouldn't think so necessarily, but I think writing and structure is really useful to sort of practice in downtime, if you can.
The dinner party thing, I went to a freelance seminar years and years ago, and they said, your friends and family, when you're in that situation and you're just not working for that little chunk of time, or whether it's a long kind of drought period, and they just always say, I'm in development. That's the line. So because your friends and family might worry for you. I'm in development, so I still have it with my mum. She's like, "What, if I have got a quiet week, I'm in development, mum. Lockdown, I'm in development, big time."
Yeah, exactly.
Well, that's great. Thank you so much, Li-Da. That's so helpful.
Pleasure. I've enjoyed talking to you.
It's brilliant speaking to you too. Thanks so much.
Thank you.